Husband discovers hidden room of his wife, turns pale when he confronted her. The first thing Ethan noticed about the house was its silence. Not the comfortable quiet of an empty home, but the heavy stillness that suggested secrets nestled in its corners. 2 years of marriage had taught him to read the moods of the Victorian-style house almost as well as he could read his wife's expressions. Tonight, something felt different. Ethan checked his watch, 7:45 p.m. Olivia's book club wouldn't end for another hour. He had the house to himself, a rare occurrence since they both worked from home. He loosened his tie and kicked off his shoes, padding across the hardwood floors toward the kitchen. That's when he heard it, a soft creak from upstairs, like weight shifting on an old floorboard. "Hello?" His voice echoed through the empty rooms. No response, just the persistent tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Probably just the house settling, he told himself, but a prickle of unease crawled up his spine. He grabbed a glass of water and tried to focus on the baseball game playing on the TV in the living room. The Yankees were up by 2 in the 7th inning, but his mind kept drifting back to that sound. After 15 minutes of pretending to watch the game, he muted the TV and listened. Nothing. And yet, Ethan stood up and walked to the staircase, his socked feet silent against the polished wood. As he climbed, each step seemed to groan louder than usual, announcing his approach to whatever, or whoever, might be waiting above. The upstairs hallway stretched before him, bathed in the soft glow of wall sconces. To the left, their bedroom door stood ajar, revealing the king-sized bed with its navy duvet meticulously arranged, Olivia's doing. To the right, his home office and the guest bedroom. And straight ahead, at the end of the hall, the door to the attic. The door that was always locked. "It's just storage," Olivia had explained when they first moved in. "Old family things I'm not ready to sort through yet." Her eyes had clouded briefly before she'd brightened again, changing the subject. Ethan, still dizzily in love with his new bride, hadn't pressed the issue. For 2 years, that door had remained locked, a small mystery in their otherwise transparent life together. Now, as Ethan approached it, he noticed something unusual, a sliver of light escaping from beneath the door. Had Olivia left a light on? Or was someone up there? He tried the brass doorknob. Still locked. Another creak sounded from beyond the door, unmistakable this time. Ethan's heart quickened. He rushed to their bedroom, opened Olivia's jewelry box, and found what he was looking for, a small silver key she thought he didn't know about. He'd spotted her using it once, when she thought he was asleep. He never mentioned it, respecting her privacy. But now, with an intruder possibly in their home, privacy seemed less important than safety. Back at the attic door, the key slid into the lock with a perfect fit. It turned easily, the mechanism clicking open as if recently oiled. Ethan pushed the door open slowly, wincing at its slight creak. A narrow staircase rose before him, dimly lit by what appeared to be a light source from above. He climbed carefully, his breathing shallow, ready to confront whatever awaited him. What he found was far worse than any burglar. The attic was not a storage space filled with dusty boxes and forgotten heirlooms. It was a bedroom, fully furnished, immaculately kept, and recently used. A queen-sized bed with a pale blue comforter sat against one wall. A vanity table held makeup products arranged in precise rows. A bookshelf displayed novels with cracked spines, well-read and loved. It was a woman's room, Olivia's room. But not the Olivia he knew. Ethan moved through the space like a man underwater, touching nothing but seeing everything. The closet door stood partially open, revealing clothes he'd never seen his wife wear. Different styles, more vintage than her usual aesthetic. On the dresser, a jewelry box held pieces he didn't recognize. And then he saw it, the photograph. Framed in silver, positioned on the bedside table where it would be the last thing seen before sleep and the first thing visible upon waking, a wedding photo. Olivia, radiant in white lace, her smile wide and genuine. But the man beside her, the one whose arm encircled her waist with comfortable familiarity, was not Ethan. He picked up the frame with trembling hands. The man was tall, with dark wavy hair and intense eyes that stared confidently at the camera. handsome in a sharp, almost dangerous way. On his finger gleamed a gold wedding band that matched the one Olivia wore in the photo, different from the platinum set Ethan had placed on her finger 2 years ago. Ethan sank onto the bed, the photograph clutched in his hands, his mind racing through possibilities, each more unsettling than the last. Olivia had told him she was a widow when they met. Married young, lost him young, she'd said, her eyes downcast. She rarely spoke of her first husband, and Ethan had never pushed, assuming the memories were too painful. But this room didn't feel like a shrine to a beloved, departed spouse. It felt like a life interrupted, or a life being lived in parallel to the one she shared with him. On the bedside table, a glass of water sat half empty, lipstick marks on its rim, Olivia's signature shade. A book lay open, face down, its spine creased. Everything suggested recent use, not a preserved memorial. Downstairs, the front door opened and closed. Keys jangled in the ceramic bowl by the door, Olivia's routine upon returning home. "Ethan? I'm back early. Where are you?" Her voice floated up the stairs, light and casual. Ethan didn't answer. He remained seated on the bed of a man he never met, holding photographic evidence of a life his wife had hidden from him, waiting for her to discover that her secret was no longer hers alone. Footsteps on the stairs. A pause. Then, softer footfalls approaching the attic staircase. "Ethan?" Her voice was different now, tighter, with an edge he'd never heard before. He looked toward the staircase just as her head appeared, her expression transforming from confusion to shock to something else, something cold and calculating that chilled him to the bone. "You shouldn't be up here," she said quietly. Ethan held up the photograph, his voice steadier than he felt. "And who is this man, Olivia? The dead husband who doesn't seem to be dead at all?" Olivia stood perfectly still at the top of the attic stairs, her knuckles white where she gripped the railing. The warm, vivacious woman who had left the house 2 hours ago seemed to have vanished, replaced by someone Ethan didn't recognize, someone with calculating eyes and a face drained of color. "You broke the lock," she finally said, her voice flat. "That's what you're concerned about." "The lock?" Ethan stood up, still clutching the framed photo. "Who is he, Olivia?" She stepped fully into the attic, closing the door behind her with a soft click that felt oddly final. For the first time in their marriage, Ethan felt a flicker of something dangerous in the air between them, not just tension, but fear. "Daniel Carter," she said, eyes fixed on the photograph rather than Ethan. "My first husband. Your dead husband." The words came out sharper than he intended. A strange smile touched Olivia's lips, there and gone in an instant. "I told you I was a widow." She moved toward the window, putting space between them. "I never said he was dead." The words hung in the air like smoke, obscuring everything Ethan thought he knew about their life together. He tried to recall her exact phrasing from when they discussed her past. Widow. She had definitely used that word. "That's not," he began, then stopped. "A widow is someone whose spouse has died, Olivia. That's the definition. Is it?" She turned to face him, something almost challenging in her expression. "Or is it someone who has lost their spouse? Because I have lost mine, Ethan. Just not to death." Ethan sank back onto the bed, trying to make sense of her words. "Then where is he? And why would you keep this entire room secret? Why tell me he was dead if he isn't?" "I never explicitly said he died," she corrected, her voice taking on the precise tone she used when discussing contract details for her work as a corporate attorney. "You assumed and I let you. That's lying by omission. That's survival." The hardness in her voice was new. Ethan placed the photo face down on the bed, unable to look at the stranger whose arm was wrapped around his wife. "Tell me everything right now. I deserve that much." Olivia crossed to the vanity and sat on the small tufted stool, her back to the mirror, facing Ethan. The physical distance between them seemed to make her more comfortable. "Daniel and I were married for 3 years," she began, her voice steady. "It ended 5 years ago. He's gone, and I've moved on. With you." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. That's all you need to know. That's nowhere near all I need to know, Ethan said, his pulse pounding in his ears. Why keep this room? Why lock it away? And if your marriage is over, why do you still have all this stuff? He gestured at the room, the personal items, the wedding photo prominently displayed. Some past should stay buried, Ethan. She stood abruptly. I love you. Isn't that enough? It was until I found out you've been lying to me for our entire relationship. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration building. What happened to him? Where is Daniel Carter now? Something flickered across Olivia's face, pain or fear, Ethan couldn't tell which. I don't know, she said quietly. You don't know? Ethan repeated incredulously. How can you not know where your first husband is? Because I don't. Her voice rose slightly. And I don't want to know. Ever again. Ethan stood and approached her, stopping when she subtly shifted away. Olivia, you're not making any sense. What are you afraid of? I'm not afraid, she snapped, but her trembling hands betrayed her. I'm being practical. The past is past. Leave it there. But you haven't left it there. Ethan gestured around the room. You've kept it perfectly preserved, right above our bedroom. You come up here, don't you? When I'm not home, or when I'm asleep. She didn't deny it. Why? He pressed. If you love me, if our marriage is real, why keep this shrine to another man? It's not a shrine, she said, her voice barely audible. It's a reminder. Of what? Of mistakes I can't afford to repeat. She squared her shoulders, composure returning like a mask sliding into place. Ethan, I understand you're upset. You have every right to be. But there are things about my past with Daniel that I can't discuss, not with you, not with anyone. Not if I want to keep us safe. The word hung in the air between them. Safe. Are we in danger? Ethan asked, a new kind of fear creeping into his voice. Olivia hesitated, then shook her head. Not as long as certain doors stay closed. Her eyes held his, pleading. Please, Ethan. Let this go. But the lawyer in him, the man who built his career on uncovering facts and pursuing truth, couldn't stop now. I need to understand what I've married into, Olivia. No more secrets. Something hardened in her expression then, something cold and resolute that Ethan had never seen before. We all have secrets, she said softly. Even you. Not like this. You'd be surprised. She moved toward the door. I need some air. We can talk more when I get back. And if I keep digging while you're gone? He challenged. She paused at the top of the stairs, her silhouette framed in the doorway. Then you do so at both our perils. She glanced back at him, her expression softening momentarily. I do love you, Ethan. Everything between us has been real. Remember that. Before he could respond, she descended the stairs. Moments later, the front door closed, leaving Ethan alone in the strange bedroom that belonged to another version of his wife, a version married to a man named Daniel Carter, who wasn't dead but was apparently dangerous enough to hide from. Ethan picked up the wedding photo again, studying the face of his predecessor. What had this man done that made Olivia so afraid? And why did she keep this room intact if she feared him? One thing was certain, despite her warnings, Ethan couldn't stop now. He needed to find out who Daniel Carter was, and what had really happened between him and the woman Ethan thought he knew better than anyone in the world. Ethan didn't sleep that night. After Olivia returned home, they engaged in a strange charade of normalcy, brushing teeth side by side in the bathroom mirror, slipping under the covers with carefully maintained space between them. Her back remained turned to him until her breathing slowed into the rhythm of sleep, or a convincing imitation of it. At 3 a.m., Ethan slipped out of bed and into his home office. If Daniel Carter was real, there would be a record of him somewhere. As a corporate lawyer with access to various databases, Ethan had resources the average person didn't. By sunrise, his eyes were burning from staring at the screen, and his notepad contained precisely nothing useful. No death certificate for Daniel Carter married to Olivia Reed, her maiden name. No divorce records. No obituary. It was as if the man had never officially existed, or all traces of him had been meticulously erased. Ethan rubbed his eyes and leaned back in his chair. He needed coffee, and a different approach. An hour later, showered and caffeinated, he called in sick to work and drove to the coffee shop where Olivia's closest friend, Maya, worked as a manager. They'd known each other since college, long before Ethan entered the picture. Maya's smile faltered when she saw him approach the counter outside the morning rush. "Ethan, shouldn't you be at the office? Taking a personal day," he said, attempting a casual tone. "Can we talk for a minute? About Olivia?" A shadow crossed Maya's face. "Is she okay? That's what I'm trying to figure out." He lowered his voice. "I need to ask you about Daniel Carter." The color drained from Maya's face. She glanced around the empty cafe, then gestured to a table in the corner. "Sit. I'll be there in a minute." When she joined him, she placed 2 mugs of black coffee between them like a barrier. "She told you about him?" Maya asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not willingly." Ethan wrapped his hands around the warm mug. "I found a room in our house, a bedroom she kept locked away. With their wedding photo." Maya closed her eyes briefly. "I told her to get rid of that room years ago." "So you knew about it?" "Of course I knew." Maya's eyes held a mixture of defiance and concern. "I helped her move those things in when she bought the house, before she met you." "Where is he, Maya? What happened?" "I can't." She stopped abruptly, shaking her head. "You need to talk to Olivia." "I tried. She shut down." "Then respect that." Maya's voice hardened. "Some stones are better left unturned, Ethan." "That's what she said. But I can't just ignore this. We're married, for God's sake. I deserve to know if there's some man out there with a claim on my wife." Maya made a dismissive sound. "Daniel has no claim on anyone anymore." "So he is dead?" Ethan leaned forward. "I didn't say that." Maya stood abruptly. "I have to get back to work. If you care about Olivia, really care about her, let this go." Another warning. Another dead end. Frustrated, Ethan spent the rest of the day visiting the local courthouse, searching public records, and even calling former clients who worked in law enforcement. By evening, he had only one tangible lead, a brief mention in a 5-year-old local newspaper of a missing person report filed for Daniel James Carter, 34, last seen at his cabin near Lake Mercer. The article was barely 3 paragraphs long, buried on page 12. The last line mentioned that his wife, Olivia Carter, was the last known person to see him alive. Ethan stared at the grainy newspaper photo of Daniel, the same confident face from the wedding photo, though with a harder set to his jaw. The article stated no body had been found, and police were investigating. But Ethan could find no follow-up stories, no resolution to the case. It was as if Daniel Carter had simply vanished from existence, and from the public record. By the time Ethan returned home, darkness had fallen. The house was quiet, all lights off except for the porch lamp. He found Olivia in the kitchen, a glass of red wine in her hand, her expression unreadable in the dim light from the range hood. "You've been investigating him," she said. Not a question. Ethan didn't bother denying it. "The police report says you were the last person to see him alive. They always suspect the spouse." Her voice was flat, detached. "Statistically speaking, were you involved in his disappearance, Olivia?" The question he'd been afraid to formulate all day finally took shape. Instead of answering, she took a long sip of wine. "You went to Maya. And a lot of other places. No one's talking." He approached slowly, as one might a cornered animal. "What are you afraid of? That I'll think you finished him? That the police will reopen the case?" "I'm afraid for you," she said softly, surprising him. "The more you dig, the more danger you're in." "From whom? Daniel? The police?" "From the truth." Her eyes finally met his, glistening with unshed tears. "You don't understand. I had no choice." "About what?" "Olivia, please," he pleaded, reaching for her hand. Just tell me what happened. Whatever it is, we can face it together. For a moment, she seemed to waver, vulnerability replacing the steel in her gaze. You would hate me if you knew. Try me. He squeezed her hand. I love you. That doesn't change because of something in your past. She withdrew her hand slowly. Love isn't always enough, Ethan. Some sins can't be forgiven. Did you finish him? Is that what this is about? No. The vehemence in her denial seemed genuine. I didn't finish Daniel. But She stopped, pressing her lips together, as if physically restraining the words. But what? I can't do this. She stood abruptly, the wine sloshing in her glass. I need you to stop investigating. For both our sakes. I can't do that. Not anymore. There's too much I don't know. Something changed in her expression then, a hardening, a decision being made. You want to know what kind of man my first husband was? Fine. Keep digging. But remember I warned you. And when you think you found the truth, remember that there are always deeper layers. She placed her wine glass in the sink with deliberate care. I'm staying at Maya's tonight. I need space to think. When I come back tomorrow, we'll talk properly. I promise. Before he could respond, she was gone, the click of the front door an echo of their earlier confrontation in the attic. Ethan stood alone in the kitchen, feeling the weight of what he'd begun to unravel. Whatever secrets Olivia was keeping, they were darker and more complex than he had imagined. But he was in too deep now to back away, even if every instinct warned him that the truth might destroy the life they had built together. With Olivia gone for the night, the house felt different, like a stranger's home filled with props from a life Ethan thought he understood. He poured himself a generous whiskey and returned to the attic room, determined to search more thoroughly. The room yielded nothing at first. The closet contained only clothes, the dresser drawers held ordinary items, scarves, jewelry, lingerie he'd never seen Olivia wear. It wasn't until he knelt to look under the bed that he found it, a wooden box, ornately carved, pushed against the wall. Inside, tied with a faded blue ribbon, lay a stack of letters. Ethan's hands trembled slightly as he untied the ribbon. The first envelope was addressed simply to Liv, in bold, masculine handwriting. The postmark was dated 6 years ago. He slid out the letter inside, unfolded it, and began to read. My darling Liv. I'm counting the hours until Friday. These business trips are getting harder to endure without you. I woke this morning reaching for you, only to find cold sheets and an empty hotel room. Sometimes I think I'm still not worthy of this life we've built, of you. But then I remember how you look at me, like I'm the man you always believed I could become, and I feel invincible again. Forever yours, D. Ethan felt a strange ache reading these words, intimate glimpses into a relationship that predated his own with Olivia. He moved to the next letter, and the next. They spanned nearly 3 years, charting the course of Olivia and Daniel's relationship. The early ones were tender, passionate. The later ones revealed increasing tension. Then he reached the final letter, dated just 1 week before Daniel's reported disappearance. Unlike the others, this one wasn't handwritten but typed, the paper creased as if it had been crumpled and then smoothed out. Olivia. I know what you did. The files from the Kingston account. I found your copies. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? You can't hide this forever. We need to talk before this gets any worse. Meet me at the cabin Friday night. Come alone. This is your only chance to fix this before I have to take matters into my own hands. Daniel. No. Darling Liv. No declarations of love. Just a cold accusation and what sounded distinctly like a threat. Ethan read it twice more, trying to decipher what the Kingston account might refer to, what Olivia might have done that needed hiding. The sound of a car door closing outside jolted him back to the present. He hurried to the window, expecting to see Olivia returning, but instead saw his elderly neighbor, Mrs. Winters, retrieving groceries from her car. Something clicked in Ethan's mind. Mrs. Winters had lived in her house for over 30 years. If anyone knew about the previous owners of his and Olivia's home, perhaps even about Olivia before she met Ethan, it would be her. 15 minutes later, Ethan sat in Mrs. Winter's floral-patterned living room, a cup of herbal tea cooling between his hands as the old woman studied him with shrewd eyes. "It's not like you to make social calls on a weeknight, Ethan," she observed, adjusting her glasses. "Especially without Olivia." "I've been thinking about the history of our house," he said, the half-truth coming easily. "How long has it been since it was built?" "Oh, the Patterson place? 1920s, I believe. Beautiful craftsmanship in those days." "And the previous owners?" "Before we bought it." Mrs. Winters took a slow sip of her tea. "Well, let's see. There was that nice young couple from Boston, stayed less than a year. Before them, a retired professor. And before him." She paused, her expression changing subtly. "Well, that would have been when your Olivia lived there. But she wasn't your Olivia then, was she?" Ethan tried to keep his face neutral. "You knew Olivia before we met?" "Not well. She kept to herself mostly. Her and that husband of hers, what was his name?" "Daniel," Ethan supplied. "Yes, Daniel. Handsome man, but there was something unsettling about him. The kind of charm that doesn't quite reach the eyes, you know what I mean?" Ethan nodded, encouraging her to continue. "They seemed happy enough at first," Mrs. Winters continued, warming to her subject. "But then the argument started. Nothing violent, mind you, just intense. Late at night, voices raised." She lowered her voice. "And then, one day, he was gone. And shortly after, she was too. House sat empty for almost a year before that professor bought it." "Wait," Ethan interrupted, confused. "Olivia moved away? After Daniel disappeared?" Mrs. Winters nodded. "Practically overnight. It was quite the topic of neighborhood gossip, especially after those police cars kept showing up." "And when did she come back?" "Come back?" Mrs. Winters looked perplexed. "She didn't, dear. Not until you two bought the house 2 years ago. Must have been quite a coincidence, ending up with the same house again." But Ethan knew it was no coincidence. Olivia had specifically suggested this house when they were house hunting, claiming she'd always admired it when driving through the neighborhood. "Did you mention to Olivia that you recognized her when we moved in?" Mrs. Winters shook her head. "I wasn't entirely sure at first. She looked different, carried herself differently. Hair was styled another way, she dressed more conservatively. But eventually I realized. I did try to say something once, at your housewarming party, but she changed the subject rather quickly. I assumed she didn't want you to know she'd lived here before." She gave him a searching look. "You didn't know, did you?" "No," Ethan admitted. "I didn't." On the walk back to his house, Ethan's mind raced. Olivia had deliberately bought the same house she'd shared with Daniel, yet kept this fact from Ethan. She'd maintained a secret shrine to her first marriage in the attic. And according to that final letter, she'd done something Daniel had discovered, something she tried to hide. The pieces didn't add up. If Olivia had finished Daniel, why return to the scene? Why keep his things? And if she hadn't finished him, why fake her identity to the point that even a neighbor who'd known her didn't immediately recognize her? Most importantly, if Olivia didn't finish Daniel, then who did? Back at home, Ethan poured another drink and sat in the darkness of their living room, the letter clutched in his hand. "I know what you did," Daniel had written. What had Olivia done? And how far would she go to keep it hidden? He felt torn between the man who loved his wife and wanted to protect her, and the lawyer who sensed a dangerous truth lurking beneath the surface. Should he love Olivia, or should he fear her? The sound of his phone ringing cut through his thoughts. Unknown number. "Hello?" he answered cautiously. "Mr. Porter?" A male voice, unfamiliar. "My name is James Carter. Daniel was my brother. We need to talk." "How did you get this number?" Ethan asked, his pulse quickening. "The same way I know you've been asking questions about my brother," James Carter replied. "I have resources. Meet me at the Riverside Diner tomorrow, 7 a.m. Come alone." The line went dead before Ethan could respond. Sleep eluded him that night. Every creak of the old house, every whisper of wind against the windows, seemed loaded with menace. By morning, exhaustion had settled into his bones, but adrenaline kept him moving. The Riverside Diner was a nondescript establishment on the outskirts of town, the kind of place truckers stopped for coffee and locals gathered for gossip. At precisely 7 a.m., Ethan pushed through the glass door, scanning the half-empty booths. A man in the corner raised his coffee mug slightly, the gesture of someone expecting company. Ethan would have known him anywhere. The family resemblance to Daniel was striking. The same dark wavy hair, though James wore his shorter. The same sharp jawline and intense eyes, though James looked older, more weathered. "Mr. Porter?" James nodded to the seat across from him. "Coffee? I'll pass." Ethan slid into the booth. "You said we needed to talk?" "You've been stirring up dust that's better left settled," James said, his voice low. "People are noticing." "What people?" James ignored the question. "How much has Olivia told you?" "Not enough," Ethan admitted. "She said she was a widow, but your brother isn't dead, is he?" A bitter smile crossed James's face. "Legally?" "Yes. Daniel Carter was declared dead in absentia 2 years ago. No body was ever found." He leaned forward. "But no, my brother isn't dead." Despite suspecting as much, the confirmation hit Ethan like a physical blow. "Where is he?" "Safe. Hidden." James's eyes never left Ethan's face. "And that's where he needs to stay." "Why? What is he hiding from?" James studied him for a long moment. "How much do you know about what your wife did before she met you?" "She was a corporate attorney." "Still is." "And what do you know about the Kingston Group?" "The name from Daniel's final letter." "Nothing." "What is it?" "Was," James corrected. "A private equity firm. Specialized in real estate acquisitions, mainly. Went under about 5 years ago amid rumors of financial improprieties." He sipped his coffee. "Your wife was the legal counsel." Ethan frowned. "What does this have to do with Daniel's disappearance?" "Everything." James reached inside his jacket and pulled out a small notebook, sliding it across the table. "My brother kept records. He wasn't just hiding from the law, Mr. Porter. He was hiding from people who would finish him, and anyone connected to him, to keep their secrets." Ethan stared at the notebook without touching it. "Including Olivia?" "Especially Olivia. She knows too much." James stood, dropping cash beside his half-finished coffee. "There's an address in there. A cabin near Lake Mercer where Daniel was last seen. Go there if you want to understand. But be careful who sees you." "Wait," Ethan called as James headed for the door. "Why are you telling me this now? After 5 years?" James paused. "Because my brother is tired of running. And because your questions have stirred the hornet's nest. They'll be watching you now. Both of you." His expression softened slightly. "Daniel loved her once. Maybe still does. He wouldn't want her hurt." With that cryptic statement, he was gone, leaving Ethan with more questions than answers, and a notebook that felt like a ticking bomb in his hands. The cabin sat at the end of a winding dirt road, half hidden by towering pines. Modest but well-built, it looked like any vacation retreat, except for the faded police tape still clinging to one corner of the porch, forgotten by time and weather. Ethan approached cautiously, Daniel's notebook tucked inside his jacket. According to the coordinates James had provided, this was where Daniel had supposedly vanished, where Olivia had last seen him. The door was locked, but a key hung from a nail beneath the porch steps, just as James had described. Inside, the cabin smelled of dust and disuse. Furniture sat draped in sheets, like pale ghosts in the dim light filtering through dirt-streaked windows. Ethan moved through the space methodically, pulling back covers to reveal ordinary items: a couch, a coffee table, a dining set. Nothing unusual until he reached the bedroom. The sheets here had been disturbed recently. On the bed lay something that made his blood run cold: Olivia's silver bracelet, the one he'd given her for their first anniversary. She'd claimed to have lost it months ago. She had been here recently. Pulse racing, Ethan dropped to his knees, checking under the bed. Nothing. He moved to the closet, sliding the door open to reveal empty hangers and a loose floorboard in the corner. Using his pocket knife, he pried it up to find a small metal box. Inside lay a USB drive, a handgun, and a handwritten confession, signed by Daniel Carter. To whom it may concern. If you're reading this, something has gone wrong. I, Daniel James Carter, being of sound mind, make this confession freely. I did not disappear of my own free will. I was forced to go into hiding after discovering evidence of fraud and money laundering at the Kingston Group, where I served as financial director. When I confronted Olivia with what I'd found, she revealed that she had already discovered the same illegal activities months earlier but had been threatened into silence by Martin Kingston himself. Together, we gathered evidence to take to the authorities, but before we could act, there was an attempt on my life. Olivia helped me stage my disappearance to protect us both while we determined the safest way to expose the truth. If I am truly gone, look to Kingston and his partners. Olivia is innocent. She only ever tried to do the right thing, even at great personal cost. The enclosed drive contains all the evidence needed to bring Kingston to justice. Daniel Carter. Ethan read the confession twice, trying to reconcile this version of events with what he knew. Daniel hadn't been threatening Olivia in that final letter. He'd been warning her. What you did wasn't a crime, it was discovering corruption. Olivia had been protecting a man on the run. But why keep the shrine-like room? Why buy the same house? And why, after all this time, was she still hiding the truth from him? A floorboard creaked behind him. Ethan spun around to find a shadow in the doorway, tall, male, familiar from photographs. You must be Ethan, said Daniel Carter, looking considerably older and more haggard than in his wedding photo, but unmistakably the same man. I think it's time we talked about your wife. Daniel stepped into the room, his movements cautious, eyes constantly darting to the windows. He looked like a man who had spent years looking over his shoulder. You're supposed to be dead, Ethan said, still gripping the confession. A humorless smile crossed Daniel's face. Legally, I am. Makes things simpler. He nodded toward the paper in Ethan's hand. I see you found my insurance policy. Is it true? All of it? Every word. Daniel moved to the window, peering through the blinds before continuing. Martin Kingston wasn't just corrupt, he was dangerous. When Olivia and I found evidence of his money laundering operations, people connected to his company started dying in accidents. So you faked your disappearance? Daniel nodded. It was Olivia's idea. She thought if I vanished and she played the part of the suspicious widow, Kingston would believe she knew nothing. His expression darkened. But he didn't buy it. Started threatening her, having her followed. She had to run too, change her appearance, her habits, even her voice. But she kept that room, Ethan said. All your things, preserved exactly as they were. She couldn't let go completely. Something like regret flickered across Daniel's face. We loved each other once. But what happened changed her. Changed both of us. And the house? Why would she bring me back to the same house? The evidence, Daniel said simply. Before I disappeared, we hid copies throughout the house, behind drywall, beneath floorboards. Places not even the most thorough search would find. She needed access to it. She could have told me the truth, Ethan said, anger finally breaking through his shock. Instead, she built our marriage on lies. She was protecting you. Daniel's voice hardened. Kingston's people would have finished you without hesitation if they thought you knew anything. Your ignorance was your safety. Then why reveal everything now? Ethan demanded. Why risk coming out of hiding? Because Kingston died 3 days ago. Daniel pulled out his phone, showing Ethan a news article. Heart attack in federal prison, where he was serving time for tax evasion. The FBI never got him on the bigger crimes, but he's gone now. His network is in shambles. So it's over? You're free? Almost. Daniel's eyes narrowed. There's still his right-hand man, Vance. More dangerous than Kingston in some ways. More ruthless. He's the one who's been watching your house, hoping I'd make contact with Olivia. Ethan felt a chill run through him. Someone's been watching our house. Black sedan, tinted windows. Parked across the street 3 nights this week. Ethan had noticed that car but thought nothing of it. Does Olivia know you're alive? Yes. Daniel's admission hung in the air. She's known all along. We've communicated through dead drops. That's why she needed the attic room. It was our system. The weight of all the deceptions pressed down on Ethan. His wife, the woman he thought he knew intimately, had been living a double life their entire relationship. I don't even know who she is, he murmured. She's the woman who saved my life, Daniel said quietly. And she's the woman who loves you enough to keep you in the dark, even when it was tearing her apart. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small recording device. She made this for you 6 months ago. Asked me to keep it, in case the truth ever came out. Ethan took it with trembling hands and pressed play. Olivia's voice filled the cabin, raw with emotion. Ethan, if you're hearing this, I've failed to keep you safe from my past. I never wanted to lie to you. Every moment with you, every touch, every laugh, that was real. The only fiction was my history. I fell in love with you honestly, completely. Please believe that. Whatever Daniel has told you about Kingston is true. I helped him disappear because it was the right thing to do, but I've lived in fear every day that Kingston's people would find him, find us. I kept the room because it contained evidence that could bring down dangerous men. I bought our house for the same reason. But I stayed with you because you became my reason for everything. Please forgive me. Please understand. I love you. Silence filled the cabin as the recording ended. Ethan closed his eyes, the pain and truth of her words washing over him. The sudden sound of tires on gravel outside shattered the moment. Daniel was instantly alert. We need to go. Now. What is it? Vance. Daniel grabbed the USB drive and gun. He must have followed you. A car door slammed. Daniel moved swiftly to the window. Back door. Go! They slipped out just as the front door crashed open. Racing through the trees, they reached Ethan's car, hidden on a maintenance path as James had instructed. What about Olivia? Ethan demanded as they sped away. If they followed me, they could go after her. Daniel pulled out his phone. She's at a safe house. Has been since she left your place. He sent a text message. But we need to move fast. The USB drive has enough evidence to put Vance away for good. We just need to get it to the FBI contact I've cultivated. And then what? Then it's over. Really over. Olivia can stop running. Stop hiding. Daniel glanced at him. The question is, will you still be there when she does? Ethan gripped the steering wheel tighter, his mind racing through all he'd learned. The betrayal of trust. The years of deception. But also the love that had made Olivia protect him, even at the cost of her own peace. She's my wife, he said finally. My real wife, whatever name she uses or past she comes from. I just want her safe. As they drove toward the FBI field office, Ethan's phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. It contained just 4 words. I'm sorry. I'm waiting. He recognized Olivia's style immediately, could almost hear her voice speaking the words. She was giving him a choice, to walk away from the lies or to embrace the complicated, imperfect truth of who they were together. Tell her I'm coming, Ethan said to Daniel, his decision made. Tell her we'll face whatever comes next together. No more secrets between us. In the rearview mirror, he noticed a black sedan gaining on them. Their journey wasn't over yet. The danger was still real. But for the first time since finding that hidden door in the attic, Ethan felt something like hope. The second marriage, the real one, was about to begin.